The cold metal floor of the prison transport ship pressed against Thorson Hayes' bruised face as consciousness slowly returned. The former Galactic Alliance Special Forces operative tried to move only to feel the bite of energy shackles around his wrists and ankles. Through the hum of the ship's engines, he could hear alien voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize. The mission had gone wrong. What was supposed to be a simple diplomatic escort to the neutral zone had turned into an ambush. His unit had been overwhelmed by ships bearing the crimson banners of the Draconian Empire. Now, as memory fragments pieced themselves together, Thorson realized he was likely the only survivor. The transport shuddered as it docked. Heavy footsteps approached, and Thorson felt himself hauled to his feet by creatures whose scaled hands dug into his arms. Through the dim lighting, he caught his first clear glimpse of his captors, reptilian humanoids with yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. "This one looks strong," one of them hissed in accented galactic standard. "The Arena Masters will be pleased." Arena Masters. Thorson's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories of the gladiatorial pits that entertained the wealthy elite of various alien empires. Captured warriors from across the galaxy were forced to fight for the amusement of crowds hungry for blood and spectacle. They dragged him through corridors that reeked of ozone and decay, past cells containing other prisoners, beings of various species, all sharing the same look of desperation and defiance. The facility was massive, carved into what appeared to be an asteroid or small moon. Everything about it spoke of cruelty and efficiency. "Welcome to the pit of Korthak," the guards sneered as they threw Thorson into a cell barely large enough for him to stand upright. "If you're lucky, you'll die quickly in your first match." The cell door slammed shut with a resounding clang, leaving Thorson in near darkness. He examined his prison. Solid metal walls, a thin sleeping mat, and a small waste disposal unit. But what caught his attention was a small observation window, and through it, the faint outline of another cell across the corridor. Hours passed before he heard a soft voice calling out in Galactic Standard. "Human, are you awake?" Thorson moved to the window. Across the way, he could make out a figure in the shadows of the opposite cell. "I'm here," he replied quietly. "My name is Lyric," the voice continued. "I've been here 3 standard months. The guards like to talk around me. They think I don't understand their language. But I've heard them mention something interesting. There's another human here somewhere, deeper in the complex, a female." Thorson's heart skipped. A human female in this nightmare. "Do you know her name?" They called her the Vulparian Princess. Apparently she's not fully human, part of some royal bloodline. They're keeping her for something special, not the regular fighting. Vulparian Princess. The name stirred something in Thorson's memory. Before the war, before his military service, he'd known someone. Tyra. Princess Tyra of the Vulparian royal house, daughter of a human mother and Vulparian father. They'd been lovers once before duty, and politics had torn them apart. "Tyra," he whispered. "You know her?" Lyric's voice carried surprise. "If it's who I think it is, yes." Thorson gripped the bars of his window. "She shouldn't be here. She's royalty protected by treaties." "Treaties mean nothing to the Arena Masters," Lyric said grimly. "They're planning to use her in some kind of political marriage. A warlord named Droskar wants to legitimize his rule by claiming a royal bride." Rage flowed through Thorson like liquid fire. Tyra, the woman he'd once loved and lost, was trapped in this hellhole being used as a political pawn. The same woman whose amber eyes had haunted his dreams, whose laughter had been the last beautiful sound he'd heard before shipping out to war. "How does the arena work?" Thorson asked. "Simple enough. Win enough fights, and they grant you freedom. Most die trying. But there's a catch. The final challenge to earn freedom involves facing Droskar himself. He's never lost. Then I'll be the first to beat him." Lyric was quiet for a moment. "You're insane. Droskar isn't just a warrior. He's augmented. Cybernetic implants, enhanced strength built-in weapons. He's killed dozens of champions. I don't care what he is, Thorson said with cold determination. He has something that belongs to me. The next morning brought Thorson's introduction to the arena. Guards dragged him through a maze of tunnels until he emerged into a vast circular pit. The arena floor was covered in sand that had been stained dark with countless battles. Above, thousands of alien spectators filled tiered seating, their roars echoing off the domed ceiling. Across the arena, a gate opened, and Thorson's first opponent emerged. It was a Morthak, a species known for their 4 arms and ramtibber razor-sharp claws. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, its exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. They'd given Thorson basic gladiator gear. Minimal armor, a short sword, and a shield. Against a Morthak, it felt woefully inadequate. But Thorson had faced worse odds during the border conflicts. He knew how to read an opponent, how to find weaknesses. The Morthak charged, all 4 arms swinging in a coordinated assault. Thorson rolled to the side, feeling claws whistle past his ear. He came up running, using his human agility to stay ahead of the creature's reach. The crowd booed. They wanted blood, not a chase. Thorson waited for his moment. The Morthak grew frustrated, making its attacks wilder, less coordinated. When it overextended with a downward strike, Thorson stepped inside its guard and drove his sword upward into the soft joint where the creature's secondary arm met its torso. The Morthak shrieked and stumbled back, blue-green blood streaming from the wound. But it wasn't finished. With 3 arms, it was still deadly. It switched tactics, using its primary arms defensively while trying to grab Thorson with the uninjured secondary arm. The dance continued for several minutes, Thorson gradually wearing down his opponent with precise cuts and dodges. The crowd's mood shifted as they began to appreciate the human's skill. Finally, when the Morthak stumbled from blood loss, Thorson delivered the killing blow. A swift thrust through the creature's throat. The arena erupted in cheers. Thorson stood over his fallen opponent, chest heaving, aware that he'd just taken his first step on what would be a long and bloody path. Back in his cell that night, Lyric congratulated him. Impressive for a first-timer. Most humans die in their first match. I'm not most humans, Thorson replied. He'd learned something important today. The crowd's reaction mattered. Spectacle was as important as survival. Days blended into weeks as Thorson fought match after match. Each victory earned him better equipment, better food, and more respect from guards and prisoners alike. He faced crystalline spiders whose webs could slice through steel void wraiths that could phase in and out of reality, and fear drakes that breathed plasma hot enough to melt metal. With each fight, Thorson's reputation grew. The crowd began to chant his name. Other gladiators started seeking his advice. But more importantly, he began to gather information about the arena's layout, its security, and the location of the special holding areas where valuable prisoners were kept. It was after his 20th victory that everything changed. He'd just defeated a pair of cybernetic predators, using their own weapons against them in a display that had the crowd on its feet. As he took his traditional walk around the arena, acknowledging the cheers, his eyes swept the VIP sections where the wealthy spectators sat. And there, in a gilded box, surrounded by guards, he saw her. Tyra. Even across the distance, even after all these years, he would have recognized her anywhere. Her hair was longer now, a cascade of auburn that caught the arena lights. She wore an elegant gown that couldn't hide the lean muscle of someone who'd kept up her combat training. When their eyes met, her hand flew to her mouth in shock. She recognized him too. The moment stretched between them, a connection across space and time that made the roaring crowd fade to silence. Then guards were urging Thorson back toward the Gladiator tunnels, and the spell was broken. That night, as Thorson paced his cell like a caged predator, he found a small data pad hidden in his evening meal. The message was simple. Training Chamber B, 7 midnight. Come alone. T. Thorson had mapped out most of the arena complex by now. Training Chamber B7 was on the same level as the Gladiator quarters used for private workouts. Getting there meant slipping past guards, but after weeks of observation, he knew their routines. At the appointed time, he made his way through darkened corridors, moving with the silence his special forces training had drilled into him. The training chamber door was unlocked. Inside, a single glow panel provided dim illumination. She stepped out of the shadows like a memory made flesh. "Hello, Thorson?" Her voice was exactly as he remembered, low, musical, with just a hint of her mother's human accent, underlying her father's Vulperian inflection. She wore simple training clothes now, and he could see she'd hidden a small energy blade in her boot. "Tyra!" He wanted to rush to her, to hold her, but something in her posture warned him to keep his distance. "What are you doing here? You should be safe on Vulperia, not in this hellhole." Her laugh was bitter. "Safe? I haven't been safe since the day I was born. My mixed heritage makes me a valuable political commodity. The Draconian Empire captured me during a diplomatic mission 6 months ago. And now they want to marry you off to this Droskar." "Tomorrow night," she said, pain evident in her voice. "The ceremony will take place in the arena before the crowd, a wedding to solidify his claim to rule 3-star systems." Thorson stepped closer. "I won't let that happen." "Thorson, you don't understand. Droskar isn't just a warlord. He's the one who's been orchestrating your fights, building you up as a champion. Don't you see? You're part of the show. He wants to defeat the human gladiator in front of his bride-to-be. It's all theater." The revelation hit Thorson like a physical blow. "He knows who I am to you. He knows everything. Our history, our relationship. He's been watching your fights, studying your techniques. He's planned this from the beginning. Then we leave. Now, I know the security rotations, the weak points in their defenses." Tyra shook her head. "And go where we're in the middle of space, surrounded by his fleet. Besides, if we run now, he'll just hunt us down, and he'll take his anger out on every prisoner in this place. So what do you suggest?" She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the familiar scent of her skin. "You do what you came here to do. You win your freedom by facing him in the arena. But when you do, you won't be fighting for just your own life. I have allies, Thorson, prisoners he's collected from across the galaxy, who are tired of being used as pawns. When you face Droskar, we'll be ready. Tyra, I lost you once because I wasn't strong enough to fight for what mattered. I won't make that mistake again." "I know." She reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing old scars he'd earned in service to the Galactic Alliance. "I've watched every one of your fights. You've become everything I always knew you could be." The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching guards. "Go," she whispered urgently. "And Thorson, be careful. Droskar has been modified far beyond what any natural warrior could face. He's made himself into a monster." Thorson slipped back through the corridors, but sleep was impossible. Tomorrow would bring the fight of his life, and he'd be doing it not just for freedom, but for the woman he'd never stopped loving. The day of the final challenge arrived with fanfare, unlike anything Thorson had seen. The arena was decorated with banners from across the Draconian Empire, and the stands were packed beyond capacity. Important dignitaries from a dozen worlds had come to witness the spectacle. In the Gladiator prep area, Thorson was given the finest armor and weapons available. His sword was Vulperian steel kept sharp enough to slice through molecule bonds. His armor was lightweight but incredibly strong, designed to deflect energy weapons and projectiles alike. As he waited for his entrance, other gladiators came to wish him luck. Xanthos, a warrior from the crystalline moons of Andromeda, whose life Thorson had saved during a team battle, gripped his shoulder with a hand that could crush stone. "You have made us all proud, human," Xanthos rumbled in his deep voice. "Whatever happens today, know that you have shown these oppressors that we are more than just entertainment." Lyric recovered from his own injuries, nodded agreement. "The guards have been whispering. There's unrest in the prisoner sections. Word of your fight has spread. Win or lose, you've given them hope." The horn sounded, calling Thorson to his entrance. As he walked through the tunnel toward the arena floor, he could hear the announcer's voice amplified throughout the complex, introducing him in multiple languages to accommodate the diverse audience. He emerged into the arena to find it transformed. A raised platform had been erected at the far end, decorated like an altar. Tyra stood there in elaborate ceremonial robes, beautiful and regal, but with chains of precious metal binding her wrists. Around the platform, draconian priests waited to perform the wedding ceremony. But first, the fight. Across the arena, another tunnel opened and Droskar emerged. Thorson had seen many horrors in his time as a soldier and gladiator, but Droskar was something beyond nightmare. The warlord had once been humanoid, but cybernetic modifications had transformed him into something monstrous. His right arm had been replaced with a massive cannon that crackled with energy. His left had been turned into a tentacle-like appendage with multiple razor-sharp blades. His torso was armored with grafted metal plates, and his eyes had been replaced with targeting sensors that glowed red in the arena lights. Droskar raised his cannon arm and fired a blast into the air. The crowd roared approval. When he spoke, his voice was amplified by speakers implanted in his throat. "Behold, citizens of the Empire. Today, I claim my bride and eliminate the last threat to my rule. This human dog has amused you with his primitive fighting skills, but now he faces the future of warfare itself." Thorson drew his sword and shield, settling into a combat stance. But before the fight could begin, Droskar raised a hand for silence. "But first, let the prisoner say goodbye to his former lover. Surely even a savage deserves that much courtesy." It was cruel theater designed to break Thorson's concentration. Guards brought Tyra closer to the edge of the platform. She looked down at Thorson, and for a moment, her composed mask slipped. He saw fear there, and love and determination. "Fight well, my champion," she called out. "Fight for all of us who cannot fight for ourselves." The words hit the guards and the crowd like a thunderbolt. In that moment, she'd claimed him, publicly shown that she chose the gladiator over the warlord. Droskar's mechanical features twisted in rage. "Enough, let's end this farce." The battle horn sounded. Droskar immediately opened fire with his cannon arm, forcing Thorson to roll behind one of the arena's scattered obstacles. The energy blasts were devastating, leaving molten craters in the metal floor. Thorson quickly realized that a direct confrontation would be suicide. He used the arena's terrain to his advantage, moving from cover to cover, drawing Droskar's fire and forcing the warlord to constantly reposition. But Droskar was smart. He wasn't just randomly firing. He was hurting Thorson, cutting off escape routes, forcing him toward the center of the arena, where there was no cover. When Thorson made a desperate run for a new position, Droskar's blade arm lashed out like a whip. The tip caught Thorson's shoulder, slicing through his armor and drawing first blood. Pain flared, but Thorson had fought through worse. He spun and brought his sword down on the extended arm, but the blade skittered off armor plating. Droskar's laugh was like grinding gears. "You cannot cut what you cannot reach, human?" The fight continued, a deadly dance between agility and power. Thorson scored several hits, finding gaps in Droskar's armor, but they seemed to have little effect. Meanwhile, each near miss from the energy cannon reminded him how quickly it could all end. The turning point came when Thorson noticed something crucial. Droskar's modifications were powerful, but they came with limitations. The cannon arm took several seconds to recharge between shots. The blade arm, while devastating, was slightly slower than the rest of his body, probably due to the weight of the modifications. Thorson began to change his tactics. Instead of trying to stay at distance, he started moving closer, using his superior speed to stay inside Droskar's optimal range. It was incredibly dangerous. One mistake would mean death, but it was the only way to win. The crowd was on its feet now, cheering every exchange. Even those who had come to see Droskar triumph were caught up in the display of skill and courage. Above the noise, Thorson could hear other gladiators chanting his name. The decisive moment came when Droskar, frustrated by his inability to land a killing blow, charged forward in a rage. His cannon arm was cycling for another shot. His blade arm pulled back for a massive strike. For just an instant, he was off balance, committed to his attack. Thorson dropped into a slide, passing beneath Droskar's weapons and coming up behind the warlord. Before Droskar could turn, Thorson drove his sword up and back, finding the one spot where modifications met original flesh, the joint where Droskar's spine entered his armored skull. The Vulparian blade, honed to molecular sharpness, sliced through cybernetic cables and organic tissue alike. Droskar's scream was cut short as his systems went haywire. Sparks flew from his modifications, and he crashed to the arena floor, twitching as his nervous system shut down. For a moment, silence reigned in the arena. Then the crowd exploded in cheers so loud they shook the structure itself. Even many of the draconian dignitaries were on their feet, caught up in the spectacle. But Thorson's attention was focused elsewhere. On the platform, Tyra had broken free of her ceremonial chains. They'd been designed more for show than security. In her hand was the energy blade she'd hidden, and she was cutting down the priests who tried to stop her. That was the signal. All around the arena, prisoners who had been forced to watch the ceremony revealed weapons they'd smuggled from the Gladiator armories. Xanthos led a charge of gladiators from the upper viewing areas where they'd been positioned as entertainment. Lyric and others attacked the guard posts, seizing communication equipment. The revolution had begun. Guards tried to reach Tyra, but she was no longer the decorative princess they expected. Years of combat training showed as she fought with deadly precision, her blade leaving trails of light as it cut through armor and weapons. Thorson raced across the arena toward her platform, cutting through guards who tried to stop him. When he reached the steps, Tyra was there waiting for him, breathing hard but alive and whole. "I told you I had allies," she said with a fierce smile. Around them, battle raged. But the gladiators had the advantage of surprise and desperation, while many of the guards had never faced truly motivated opponents. The arena's design, meant to contain prisoners, now worked against its masters, as narrow corridors became choke points that favored the defenders. Elira, Tyra's former bodyguard, who had been captured alongside her, appeared at their side. She'd apparently been held in another part of the complex, but had fought her way to the arena the moment the uprising began. "Princess," she said formally, then grinned. "Your Highness looks well for someone who just broke up her own wedding." "The exit tunnels are this way," Tyra said, leading them toward a section of the arena Thorson hadn't seen before. "I've had months to study this place. There's a maintenance corridor that leads to the hangar bays." They fought their way through the complex, picking up other escaped prisoners along the way. Some were gladiators. Others were political prisoners, like Tyra. All united in their desire for freedom, the guards were falling back, overwhelmed by the coordinated assault. At the hangar bay, they found chaos. Some of Droskar's forces were trying to launch ships to prevent escapes, while others were attempting to restore order in the arena complex. In the confusion, Tyra led them to a sleek courier ship. "Droskar had this prepared for our honeymoon," she said with bitter irony. "It seems appropriate to steal it." Xanthos and several other gladiators had secured the hangar's control room, giving them precious minutes to escape. As they boarded the ship, Thorson looked back at the arena complex. "What about the others? We can't just leave." "We're not," Tyra said from the pilot's seat. She was already running through the launch sequence. "This uprising will spread to every draconian prison world. Word is already being transmitted through smuggler networks, resistance cells, underground railways. What we started here will become a galaxy-wide revolution." They launched from the hangar into space where a battle was already raging. Ships loyal to Droskar engaged vessels that had been commandeered by escapees. But Tyra's ship was fast and well-armed, and they punched through the blockade into hyperspace. In the days that followed, they made their way to the neutral territories, sending out messages to every free world in the galaxy. The footage of Thorson's fight and the subsequent uprising spread like wildfire. Other prison worlds reported revolts. Several draconian systems declared independence. On a remote space station in the Outer Rim, Thorson and Tyra finally had time to themselves. They stood on an observation deck, watching stars wheel past the transparent aluminum windows. "So what happens now?" Thorson asked. They'd spent the journey focused on survival and coordination with other rebel cells. This was the first quiet moment they'd had. "Now we build something new," Tyra said, taking his hand. "The old treaties and alliances are breaking down anyway. Maybe it's time for something better. Together." She turned to face him, and he saw in her eyes the same determination that had carried them through the arena and the escape. "Together, but not just you and me. All of us. Humans, Vulparians, Morthacs, everyone who believes that strength should protect, not dominate." She paused, a smile playing at her lips. "Though I admit I've grown rather fond of watching you fight. Perhaps we should keep that part." Thorson laughed, the sound strange after so much violence and struggle. "I think I've had enough fighting for a while." "Good. Because we have a different kind of fight ahead of us now. Building a new alliance, creating a government that serves everyone, not just the powerful. It won't be easy." "The best things never are," Thorson said, pulling her close. As they embraced, the stars bore witness to a love that had survived war captivity and the arena itself. Around them, the galaxy was changing, old powers crumbling as new alliances formed. The revolution that had begun with a gladiator's determination to save the woman he loved was spreading across space, bringing hope to countless worlds. In the months that followed, the Vulparian-Human Alliance became a reality with Tyra and Thorson as its founding leaders. They kept the gladiatorial skills that had saved them, but now they used them to train defenders rather than entertainers. The arena complex where they had met again was converted into a memorial and a training facility for peacekeepers. Other liberated gladiators found new purposes as well. Xanthos became the head of the Alliance's military academy teaching strategy and honor to a new generation of warriors. Lyric used his knowledge of prison systems to help design detection networks that would prevent such facilities from operating again. Elira remained at Tyra's side now as an advisor and friend, rather than just a bodyguard. Together, they worked to integrate rescued prisoners from dozens of species into the growing alliance. The Draconian Empire's power was broken, its remaining territories either joining the alliance or declaring independence. Some Draconian worlds embraced the new order, tired of their own oppressive system. Others retreated into isolation, nursing old grudges and dreams of revenge. But the alliance grew stronger each year, built on principles that Thorson and Tyra had learned in the arena. That true strength comes not from domination, but from standing together against those who would oppress others. Their love story became legend, but more than that, it became a symbol of what was possible when people refused to accept that power should rest with the strongest alone. Years later, when the first generation of Alliance children asked about the old days, about how the galaxy had changed the story, they heard was not just about a gladiator who fought his way to freedom. It was about how two people who refused to accept the world as it was managed to help create the world as it should be. The arena was silent now, used only for ceremonies and remembrance. But sometimes late at night, Thorson and Tyra would visit it together, standing on the platform where Droskar had intended to claim his bride through force. They would hold hands and remember all those who had died for freedom and all those who would live free because of their sacrifice. In the end, the human gladiator had indeed left a trail of bodies to reach his captive alien mate. But the path he carved led not just to love reunited, but to a galaxy where love and justice could flourish. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all.